We've got ourselves a pretty quiet waiver wire heading into week number 10, but still plenty to break down here. We've got some players whose stock is on the rise or on the decline. We've got some waiver ads, some streaming options for week 10 and beyond, and plenty to discuss to get you set up for the stretch run of the fantasy football season long leagues. My name is, welcome on into the waiver wire Q&A right here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter channels. My name is Jim Sannes. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberfire.com, joined here as always by JJ Zachariason. He is the editor-in-chief of numberfire.com. JJ, we are heading into week number 10. Looks like waivers are kind of thin this week. What's your thoughts on that and how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. You mentioned the streaming thing for week 10, that we'd have some streaming options. This honestly, we do have some streaming options if anyone needs them. I mean, they are out there, but this honestly might be, I've been analyzing this stuff for 10 years now. For a living for 8 years. I don't think I've ever seen a week where traditional streaming quarterbacks and defenses have been this bad. It is absolutely atrocious. Like, you can make the argument that Teddy Bridgewater is the top quarterback streamer this week when his spot is just completely mediocre. I mean, it's just not one that you would really want to target normal weeks. So just not a great week for streaming. And even defenses, I think there's only really like two of them. You could actually go with Philadelphia against Denver, but there's only really like two of them. So it's a really, really weird week. And then, as you noted, the waiver wire is not that great, but we did get some news today that could shake things up a little bit.
It certainly could. We'll break that down. We got some questions on that already that I saw earlier on. We'll tackle those in a bit. But first, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Twitter pages. We are live here each and every day at 4 p.m., each and every weekday. Talking NBA tomorrow. We have Thursday Night Football on Thursday and the Snake Draft coming your way on Friday. So hit subscribe wherever you're watching and get those questions in for today. We'll take them live here on air. Starting off with Shake and Bake 145. Indianapolis to the Baltimore defense. JJ, let's start there. Who do you prefer on defense? Indianapolis is facing Jacksonville this week, and Baltimore facing Miami on Thursday. We're not sure the status on Tua as of yet.
Yeah, I think that you could just go with a tiebreaker of who's playing at home here and go with Indy against Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence was banged up in that game against Buffalo this past week. Maybe that lingers a little bit. Maybe we don't see, not that offense has really been moving the ball that well anyway, but maybe we see even more of a downgrade there. Does sound like James Robinson's going to be back this week, which is an upgrade for the offense. I think both of these defenses are in good spots. If Jacoby Brissett starts, probably would feel more comfortable going Baltimore, but if Tua starts, maybe I would go with Indy. Maybe that's the way I would play this.
And you'll know that on Thursday too, which is very helpful with regards to making the decision. I think probably a safe way is to get Indy now, and then you can always audible later on. Other question here, is D'Ernest Johnson worth burning the number one waiver priority on if you don't need him this week? And that's interesting to note here because Nick Chubb, in case you missed it earlier on, did test positive for COVID-19, as did Demetric Felton. Kareem Hunt still on IR. Doesn't sound like he'll be back for this week. So JJ, are you burning a number one priority on D'Ernest if you've got that, if you don't need him this week? But also, what are your thoughts on D'Ernest Johnson overall for this week?
Yeah, so I would not burn him. Definitely don't burn D'Ernest Johnson. That would not be good. The top waiver claim, I wouldn't burn it on D'Ernest Johnson just because, if you're not using him this week, just because, we don't know what that usability is really going to look like moving forward. I think with Johnson long-term, for him to be viable, what you basically need is Kareem Hunt to continue to be sidelined and him play sort of that RB2 role, be sort of a flex play. But, even still, and then obviously he has upside if something were to happen to Nick Chubb again, then he could hypothetically be the starter. So, he's someone that's worth rostering, but I don't know if I would burn the number one priority on a guy like Johnson, especially if I wasn't going to use him this week. The other thing I want to throw out there, and this is pure speculation, this is not me having any sort of information or anything, but it was reported that D'Ernest Johnson was a close contact, which makes sense because it was the whole running back room that tested positive. So D'Ernest Johnson tested negative. He didn't test positive, but he was evidently a close contact to the other running backs on that team. And so there is a chance that he ends up still testing positive later this week. So that's at least some risk that we're running in adding him this week. I believe I saw that from a Browns reporter earlier, Jen. I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah.
That's
so just something to keep in mind. And if you guys can go look for it on Twitter and stuff, but it did sound like he was a close contact with those guys, which is very logical because I'm sure he was around the, John Kelly and Nick Chubb and Demetric Felton because it's the running back room. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're putting in those bids, that there is still a chance that even Dearness Johnson isn't able to go this week. I would say to sort of approach it like he is going to be the RB1, but even still, there's a chance that happens.
And there's also a chance that like Nick Chubb could test negative twice before Sunday.
Chance, yeah.
That's also possible too. Worth noting for that as well in terms of how you're viewing this. So that would probably also influence. If it's number one priority, that should influence things as well. Joseph is asking about Devin Singletary. We don't typically do start sit here, but I think it's worth talking about overall sentiment around Devin Singletary if Zach Moss were to sit to try to decide, okay, how desperate do I need to be for this week? So let's assume that Zach Moss can't go. How are you viewing Devin Singletary for week number 10?
Probably an RB2. And I say that only because of the matchup. You know, historically, we've seen Singletary in the spot without Zach Moss. And I say historically, I mean, you can look at like last year and stuff, but Devin Singletary is sort of like the lone back in that backfield. They're still going to get other running backs involved in some way. But, you know, I think he'd still be an RB2 just given the matchup against the Jets, you know, a probable positive game script, especially coming off a game where they lost to Jacksonville. I think that their heads are going to be a little bit more right this week. And would anyone be shocked if they drop like a 45 burger on the Jets? I don't think we would be shocked at all.
Never shocked if anyone drops 45 on the Jets.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, if Zach Moss is ruled out, then Devin Singletary is an RB2 this week. So, you know, if he's on your waiver wire, I'd pick him up. And look ahead of that. I didn't see any updates today on Zach Moss. I don't know if you did, Jim.
Nope.
But definitely, you know, check that out like tonight if there's more reports, you know, before you have to put in that waiver claim.
Typically, it's about 50-50 if a guy gets cleared. So that's noteworthy too for Damian Harris from Andre Stevenson. Same thing for them to see if they'll be cleared for this week on the Patriots. Joseph needs some roster space. How would you rank the following receivers in half PPR? And Joseph, I hope you're dropping them for something good because all these guys pretty solid. Jalen Waddle, Cole Beasley, Rashad Bateman, and Van Jefferson. I want to keep all of them, JJ. Yeah. That'd be me. Where are you at on these guys specifically?
This is really tough. It's really tough because I like them all in their own unique ways. Like I think that like a guy like Van Jefferson is interesting because now he has pretty clear flex appeal, but he also has appeal if something happens to Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods. So he has sort of that like flex upside look to him. Rashad Bateman obviously seeing a lot of looks in that offense. You know, the Ravens are still a run heavy offense. Let's be clear. I mean, they're still not like a super pass heavy offense. The thing that's going on with Baltimore is that they're running a ton of plays. They're running 70 plays a game, which leads the NFL right now. I don't know how sustainable that's going to be. They've played in a lot of like close games, some OT games. I mean, that has to do with why that's been boosted and why some of the wide receivers are seeing the volume that they're seeing. My fear with Bateman, and I love Bateman. I think he should be rostered everywhere. I've been talking about him on my podcast for like a month and a half now. My fear with Bateman, though, is that Sammy Watkins has been sidelined. Yeah. And there, you know, I don't want to throw out the too many mouths to feed argument, but at the same time, when they're all good players, you know, Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews and Sammy Watkins is fine. I mean, they're going to command some sort of target share. So I worry about where the ceiling is for a guy like Bateman. I think, you know, Cole Beasley has been seeing a really healthy work in that offense. I think that he has a nice floor in a PPR format. This is half PPR, so it's not as appealing. And Jalen Waddle is basically like Miami's Cole Beasley plus, you know,
he's
like
new Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think he's fine. So I would probably put Waddle number one on this list just because of the injuries going on with Devontae Parker. You know, Will Fuller can't get right. So he's going to be fed. I mean, he's been fed over the last like month and a half. I'd probably put him one, and I'd probably put Bateman two, but I say that I think that the next three are sort of in a cluster. Like
Correct.
I can make an argument for any of them, but I would go Waddle one at least. And if you just need strictly upside, I would say no to Cole Beasley because I think that he's not going to necessarily present that. Bateman might be the play as like the middle of the ground, you know, middle of the road, sort of like upside / floor play. And then Jefferson being sort of like yes, he's not as good as the other three on a week to week basis, but he does have that upside if something happens to the other wide receivers. So maybe I would go Waddle, Bateman, Jefferson, Beasley in that case.
I think I'd agree with that as well. Just because like Jefferson's like, I like if I'm thinking about this from like a FOMO perspective, I would kick myself into the end of time if I drop Van before things improve for him.
The thing that needs to be understood in situations like this too is that this isn't a projection of how many points I think these guys are going to score from here on out. Because
like
if that was the case,
probably be number two on that.
Yeah,
list.
Beasley would probably be two on that list. Yeah,
right.
I'm thinking more of like potential upside and potential, league winning ability, if you will. And Jefferson, you know, it has that. I mean, Jefferson's going to blow up eventually. I mean, his peripherals are too good for him to not do anything. He just has to be a horrific wide receiver if he's not going to be usable with the peripherals that he's been seeing. So
and he's not, because Matthew Stafford's efficiency when targeting Van Jefferson is outstanding.
Yeah.
So that is definitely not the case. Van Jefferson is on the verge of doing some good stuff. Okay. Henflins is asking, is it time to give up on Jacoby Myers? Had good target shares earlier on, but now that's declining. Mac Jones has had some bumps, I would say, as well. Where are you at on Jacoby right now?
Well, it's funny because I was talking to you, Jim, yesterday when I was writing up 15 transactions, and I actually said, is Jacoby Myers because he was going to be a drop on 15 transactions this week. Spoiler alert. But so I messaged Jim and our colleague Brandon Gadula, and I was like, yo, is Jacoby Myers am I seeing things right now? Is he kind of like a drop candidate at this point? And I think you agreed that he's at least a fringe drop candidate. I think if you're in a 10-team league, he's droppable. He's 100% droppable in a 10-team league. It's more fringe when you get to a 12-team. If you're in a full PPR league, that matters a lot too. He's not seeing the red zone work that we would like him to see, at least compared to the other, the tight ends in the offense, and the fact that New England's not an offense that you're really targeting in terms of it just being good and presenting those opportunities. So he's one of those players where he's going to be usable. He'll be usable enough. But I don't think you're going to really kick yourself if you drop Jacoby Myers. I don't think it's sort of like what we were talking about with Cole Beasley.
The anti-Van Jefferson. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
With Jacoby, it just depends on your situation. If what you're picking up is more valuable, do that. Because there are a lot of situations where he will be more valuable than what you're adding. Just because I know as someone who has some bad season-long teams, I know there are rosters where I would take Jacoby Myers. Sure. That's not universally true. So it's pretty team-dependent for him. But he's on the fringe and very much in that consideration for dropping. Milo, if Mitchell is a hold, as you stated in your column, the 15 transactions column up on Number Fire or on the Late Round Podcast, he's my RB4. Would you look to trade him for an upgrade at wide receiver? So Mitchell is not someone Milo is leaning on right now. If that is the case, would you look to move Mitchell for an upgraded wide receiver?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. Look, I like Mitchell. The reason he was a hold this week is because over the last few weeks, I've sort of been viewing him as a low-end RB2, and I think that given his receiving usage this past week, he's more of a mid to high-end RB2 now. So I wanted to sort of update my stance on Mitchell and let people know that I got new information. They utilize them differently, and so I'm rolling with it there. I think that given that roster that you just showed, if he's your RB4 and you have Jarvis Landry as your wide receiver 3 and you're needing to start 3 wide receivers, let's say, I don't mind Terry McLaurin. I think he's a fine enough wide receiver 2. AJ Brown's a wide receiver 1.
I think Manny's awesome.
Manny's there. I saw that. Yeah, Manny's. Never mind. Manny's really the wide receiver 3 on that team at this point. But I think that what you could do is pair up Elijah Mitchell and a player like Manny or Landry and try to upgrade a wide receiver 3 on your team. That's what I would do, because you could realistically, if it's a running back heavy team, you could pair both those guys up depending on how that team views the other 3 wide receivers on your team. But you could pair up a Mitchell and Manny and upgrade and get what if you got a Justin Jefferson type? I mean, that could really change the dynamic of your team. So think 2 for 1 in cases like this, because you have a lot of depth and other teams in your league might not have that depth. They might need, teams need running backs for sure. So you might be able to upgrade one of those wide receiver spots.
Yep, I think that's a smart way to view things here. Okay, Joseph says, would you pick up Dawson Knox and Logan Thomas if you got Mike Gesicki for this week? Now, Knox is not confirmed, at least as far as I've seen, to be back in for this week as of yet. That was the expectation because he was not put on IR, and this would be the 3rd game after his hand injury. Probably should be back. Logan Thomas seems like we'll be back, but Gesicki with no Devontae Parker gets 20%, 19-20% of the targets. I know it's Brissett. I know it's a tough matchup, but I feel like I'd have a really hard time saying no to Gesicki over options like that for this week. What about for you?
Yeah, I would too. Logan Thomas wasn't seeing the same work that Mike Gesicki's seeing in his offense, and you could argue pretty easily that even with Tua or Brissett, whoever starter, it's not like the passing efficiency is going to be that dramatically different. So yeah, I would say Gesicki over both of these guys at this point. I think Gesicki even over Knox if we knew that Knox was playing, right? Knox is a red zone guy. He's someone that's been involved close to the end zone, and that's been really helpful for his fantasy value, but he's not seeing the same kind of target share that Mike Gesicki's seeing, and I'm going to chase that volume more than anything else.
Agreed here. Francis is asking, should we drop Kenneth Gainwell for Eno Benjamin? Gainwell's role underwhelming. Eno, I think, played about 20% of the snaps on Sunday. Didn't get a lot of work, though. That was mostly James Conner. So would you drop Gainwell for Eno right now?
Yeah, but here's the thing too about what happened in that game for the Cardinals is that you're looking at your third string running back in Eno Benjamin versus James Conner, your 1B, let's say. Of course, you're going to utilize, when an injury happens, Eno Benjamin hasn't gotten much playing time in his NFL career yet. So it's not like that shocking that James Conner saw this amazing backfield share and he had like a 19, especially without Kyler Murray, had his 19% target share in that game. The one thing that we have to remember is two things. One thing is that James Conner has not been able to stay healthy throughout his NFL career. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that Eno Benjamin kind of comps really well to Chase Edmonds. Like he's the same kind of back, not the biggest back in the world, really productive in college, had a really good receiving share and reception share and receiving workload in college. Came in, I thought he was going to be a satellite back plus, or could be that, let's say. And now he has that opportunity. So the way that I'm sort of viewing Eno is that, first off, yes, you should drop Kenneth Gainwell for Eno Benjamin, I think, because Gainwell is essentially the third running back on that team at this point with Jordan Howard. He's going to be he's just going to be a forgotten man once Miles Sanders comes back. Whereas Eno Benjamin is going to be the number 2 in one of the best offenses in the league. And obviously James Conner, he's one injury away from being the starter on that team. And we know that that's been a valuable position for both James Conner and Chase Edmonds in fantasy. So I think Eno Benjamin's a really, really good ad this week because he has that upside with James Conner being, I don't want to say injury prone because I'm not a doctor. I don't know those things, but he's been hurt. I mean, he can't stay healthy. And Eno Benjamin actually to me is a good running back. He ranked really well in my prospect model, all things considered. And I think that he can play sort of like a Chase Edmonds light role in that offense.
And I think with Eno, it's one of those situations where there are good unknowns. We know what Gainwell's role is going to be, and it ain't great. We don't know what Eno's role is going to be with a full week of practice as the RB2. And I think that's a good unknown in terms of his expectation here. Let's talk to Lee. Should I trade Keenan Allen, David Montgomery, Noah Fant for DK Metcalf, Michael Carter, Eli Mitchell, and Chase Edmonds with Mark Andrews at tight end? So basically, the thought process here, they've got Mark Andrews, don't need him. Could they trade away Noah Fant in order to get upgrades elsewhere? What are your thoughts on this one?
It's a lot of pieces. I just feel like it's kind of a musical chairs trade, as I say, where it's just like, you're just kind of like moving things around, but you're all getting the same, you're all getting a seat, like you're going to be fine. Because Keenan Allen and DK Metcalf from here, I mean, is there one that you really prefer a lot more than the other?
DK.
That's what I was going to say.
I've been really annoyed with Keenan Allen's yardage. I don't know. It's weird vibes.
Yeah, and not only that, but if you look at who the Chargers have faced over the last handful of weeks, and Mike Williams' lack of usage and lack of production, they've played a lot of teams that can lock up those top wide receivers on the perimeter.
Well, and they play teams that intentionally limit deep passes. Right. By the way, they're facing a team that doesn't do that this week. You should use Mike Williams in DFS, but they've been facing teams that are going to shut down Mike Williams and funnel targets to Keenan Allen intentionally.
Right. So I think that, yes, DK with Russell Wilson coming back, I'd feel differently if Russ was out for the year. And then David Montgomery, I mean,
give him up. Please don't give up David Montgomery right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you look at Montgomery, I know that he didn't. I actually think Montgomery's a buy right now after seeing the snap share that he had against Pittsburgh.
86% off a knee injury.
Yeah, right. And we can't
expect.
I think anyone that was thinking logically thought that Khalil Herbert, who looked awesome, was going to dig into Montgomery's workload a little bit more than he just didn't. I mean, he just wasn't on the field very often. And Montgomery didn't have a great game because of the matchup. I mean, Pittsburgh's been really, really good against running backs. They have a great front seven. And
he looked good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he looked fine.
It was not him.
He looked fine. So
yeah, his matchup.
Yeah. So I mean, this is I just feel like it's not. I don't know if it. I
would try to move Noah Fant for something else and keep Montgomery. That's what I would do. Make a smaller deal with Noah Fant. Keep Montgomery for yourself. Maybe move Keenan if you have got similar
But I just don't know. Yeah, because I don't know if the upgrade from Keenan Allen to DK Metcalf is worth the downgrade from Montgomery to Elijah Mitchell. That's just, it's close. It's close enough, but I just don't know if it's really worth it. And then you're giving away Noah Fant on top of that.
To me, Montgomery is the key piece in there that makes me say no. That's where I'm at right there.
Yeah.
Henflins, ROS, rest of the season with the best chance at wide receiver 2+ upside. Jacoby Myers, no. Brandon Ayuk and Elijah Moore. Now, Elijah Moore has been doing well the past couple weeks, 6+ targets in 3 straight, but 2 of those came with no Corey Davis. So that's something that sticks in my mind with him. Who would you view as having the best upside from this group?
Not only that, But Elijah Moore didn't even have that great of peripherals this past week. I mean, he's still playing, like he played starter snaps. And here's, I mean, look, I'm a truther. I love Elijah Moore. I think he's going to be amazing. I think he's very, very good. And the big piece for me with Moore is that he's doing what he did against Indianapolis while playing on the perimeter. He only played 24% of his snaps from the slot because Jamison Crowder plays the slot. That's big for a guy who's developing. He really didn't play that role. He didn't play on the outside. He didn't play press coverage at all in college.
He said that he didn't know how to play out. Like he said that it's a struggle for him to learn outside, but he's been doing this outside, which is good long term. Short term is where I have the issues.
Right. And you have Corey Davis that'll eventually come back, you would assume. And it's not that great of an offense. I think I'm leaning Ayuk here in terms of upside. I do have some worry about it, like there being George Kittle being healthy and Deebo Samuel being Deebo Samuel. I have some worry about Ayuk's target share ceiling. But I think that of these three, he has the most upside.
I'd agree with that as well. Let's talk to Matt. JJ, would you trade Joe Mixon for Saquon Barkley? We don't typically skew towards running back or position for position trades, but just overall, how are you viewing these two relative to each other? I think that's kind of the overall thought here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, right? Like, I don't think that. I don't know. I think that they're probably like back to back in rest of season rankings right now, right? Like they've got to be really close. I would probably stick with Mixon. Maybe that's not the smart thing to do. But I think the offense is just better. I trust it a little bit more. And Saquon's had that injury. He's coming off the injury. I think I trust Mixon a little bit more. But if you want to go for upside, I think that Saquon probably presents that upside a little bit more because we've seen Mixon this season already lose some routes to Samaje Perine, even Chris Evans, and not have massive target share games per se. So, I think Saquon's the upside play. If you're sitting there with like 4 wins right now or 3 wins, then maybe go for Saquon. But if you're sitting there with like 7 wins or something, then I think I'd probably just stick with Mixon. But I usually just don't like these kinds of trades. I hate these kind of trades because there is going to be a loser. Me talking about this right now, no matter what I say, I mean, like there's going to be one side that wins and one side that loses. Right. And it's like a 50-50 thing. There's just not a clear answer here. Unless there's a clear answer, that's the only time I make trades like that.
One thing in favor of Mixon, I would say, is that with Chris Evans active last week, because he had missed week 8. Evans is active last week, and Mixon still got 5 targets. I think that was encouraging. It was a super negative script, but they kept Mixon out there for a 63% snap rate. That was good, but I think viewing it as Saquon having the highest upside is the correct way to view things right now. Okay, go back to James Conner here. We talked about Benjamin and the fact that he's worth an ad this week for sure due to ambiguity, but after saying that, what's your thoughts on James Conner with Chase Edmonds out for this week?
RB1. I mean, he has to be an RB1 in fantasy, right?
Good, man. Like, he looked great.
Yeah, he looks great. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Pitt grad and James Conner is the man. I'm saying that because his workload was amazing. And, I don't think that he's going to see the same kind of workload necessarily, especially the target share. But even still, I mean, the workload, the backfield share is going to be there. He's an RB1. He's an RB1 without Chase Edmonds.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that as well. Let's talk to Andrew here. Russell Gage is on waivers. We know that Calvin Ridley's going to miss at least the next 2 games as he is tending to personal matters. So are you looking to add Russell Gage, given that this person may be starting Carlos Hyde potentially?
Yeah, I mean, like you could play him over Carlos Hyde as long as James Robinson's back. But the thing with Gage is that we've seen this sort of like yo-yo going on with the Atlanta Falcons wide receivers throughout the season where Gage has had a high target share game in the past, and then he comes back out and he has like 6% of the team's targets. So it's just not an offense outside of Kyle Pitts right now that I really want to invest in or care about. Matt Ryan's actually not been that bad, I should say. And Cordero Patterson, I can't forget about CPAT, of course. I'm talking more, pass catchers, not out of the backfield. But yeah, I mean, I'm not like super high on Gage. I thought about adding him to the 15 transactions column this week, but I'd rather shoot for more upside with like an Elijah Moore or something.
I'd agree with that as well. Samantha here is asking, speaking of Elijah Moore, how would you rank these waiver ads the rest of the way in a potential situation? Might be flexing one of them. Pat Freiermuth, obviously, if you need a tight end, it's going to just be a rock star here. Elijah Moore, Ramondre Stevenson, we don't know his status with the head injury there. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones getting deep targets, not a lot of overall volume in that offense. How would you rank those guys right now?
Probably in that order. I think I'd go in that order with Freiermuth first, Elijah second, Stevenson third, and DPJ fourth. I might flip the last two and go Donovan Peoples-Jones over Stevenson. Peoples-Jones, I think that we can probably project him in like a 15 to 20% target share from here on out, like in that range. Right. And the Browns aren't going to have the same game script that they had against Cincinnati every week.
I mean, there's no Odell. They can't be stopped now.
Yeah, they're just, it's just not going to happen. But the other thing too that works in Peoples-Jones's favor is that Baker Mayfield, we were talking about this one earlier, Jim, but Baker Mayfield currently leads the league in 15 plus air yard rate. 24% of his throws have gone 15 or more air yards, which is the highest in the league. And that really fits a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones who can get down the field on the perimeter, like we saw, against Cincinnati and like we've seen throughout his short career so far. So if you want to go Peoples-Jones over Stevenson, I think that's fine. I'm just thinking more like you're stashing this person. And if I'm stashing, I'd probably want to just stash someone like Stevenson who has some upside to get more work in his backfield, but at the same time, maybe he just takes over and just sees more work than Damian Harris. He was better than Damian Harris in week 9, at least. So, we'll see what happens there.
He was eating into his role before they both got hurt. Damian Harris's role was pretty bad. With Donovan Peoples-Jones, Baker threw deep 7 times in 21 attempts on Sunday. 3 of those deep targets were to Peoples-Jones. So he could have like an MVS type role where he's like his floor is 0 every week, but he could get you a usable week. And I think that's probably a useful way to view him there. Let's talk to Chicago Bears fan. Hope you're doing okay today. After Justin Fields played well last night, despite the loss. Feel good about that. DJ Moore or Robert Woods the rest of the way? What you got?
It's got to be Robert Woods, right?
Probably.
Like it has to be.
So I want to tie myself to Matthew Stafford or PJ Walker / Sam Darnold.
Tough PJ choice. Walker, baby. I'm wearing the Roughnecks hoodie today because I'm speaking PJ Walker as starter into existence.
Our producer Cal is going to lose his mind about the XFL reference. He loved PJ Walker. You made his day. You
amazing. Love me some PJ Walker. I love some Cam Phillips too back during the XFL. He was awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think that you have to go with Robert Woods at this point. DJ Moore probably going to have like better peripherals than Robert Woods rest of season. But there's more than just peripherals whenever we're looking at this stuff. That's just a way for us to see who's regressing, who's not, et cetera, et cetera. But Robert Woods still seeing a healthy workload in that offense, and he's a clear starter. I mean, he's running as many routes as Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson. And the offense is just way, way better. So I'm going to go Robert Woods over DJ Moore.
I would agree. Let's talk to Bethany Peters. Says that Odell Beckham just cleared waivers. So that was, I think, at 4 p.m. was when that was supposed to come down. So Odell is a free agent. Knowing that, JJ, probably on a couple wires. Are you adding Odell or no?
Yeah, I am. I would add him over pretty much any wide receiver that's out. Like I'd add him over Elijah Moore and stuff this week. I think that there's a lot of intrigue. Especially, if he goes to a place like Green Bay where he could step in and honestly see like a 20% target share and not even affect really Devontae. I mean, if anything, it might make, because Devontae Adams, maybe he wouldn't see like the 40% shares that he's seen this year, but Devontae Adams will still see 30% of the team's targets. They're going to be more efficient offensively. And OBJ would see, if he sees 20% of Aaron Rodgers' targets, he could be a wide receiver, low end wide receiver too, hypothetically, if things click. So yes, I would add OBJ. I hope he goes to Green Bay because I think that's the one spot. They're in Oakland. They're in Vegas are the two places where I don't think it impacts fantasy football like a dramatic amount. And at the same time, it sort of helps everyone around them and still makes them all viable. I don't like when guys sign mid-season and just like torpedo values of other players when like you can't plan for it and it's just obnoxious. It's just chaotic. So I'm hoping for Vegas or Green Bay for OBJ.
I am down for that as well. Grim Fan is asking, is it safe to drop Kadarius Toney to get Miko Hardman? I'd have a really hard time dropping Toney. I know it's been pretty rough recently, but like we've seen what he can do. And I know the receivers should get healthier, especially when it's someone like we know what Miko Hardman is. I have a tough time doing this one. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would just ask like, what's the point? Like at the end of the day, like a bad game from Toney, Miko Hardman has bad games all the time in fantasy, right? So like you're really looking at upside here, and we've seen Toney have tremendous upside as a rookie, smaller sample size, more ambiguity. So I'm going with Toney over Miko Hardman all day.
I would agree with that as well. That is all the time that we have here for today for more of JJ's thoughts. So make sure you check out the Late Round Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the 15 transactions column up on numberfire.com. JJ, appreciate you for the time for today, and good luck with your waivers and good luck in week number 10.
Thanks, Jim.
You can find JJ on Twitter at Late Round QB. I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you're watching here: Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. Tom Vecchio has you covered tomorrow to talk NBA DFS. Brandon Gadula has the Thursday Night Football preview on Thursday. We have our snake draft coming up on Friday with me, JJ, and Brandon as well. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, the biggest XFL fan, running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with waivers. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Waiver Wire Q&A.